Chapter 11. Base Camp. May 6, 1996. 17,600 feet. How much of the appeal of mountaineering lies in its simplification of interpersonal relationships, its reduction of friendship to smooth interaction, its substitution of another for the relationship itself, behind a mystique of adventure, toughness, footloose vagabondage, all much-needed antidotes to our culture's built-in comfort and convenience, may lie a kind of adolescent refusal to take seriously aging, the frailty of others, interpersonal responsibility, weakness of all kinds, the slow and unspectacular course of life itself. Top climbers can be deeply moved, in fact maudlin, but only for worthy martyred ex-comrades. A certain coldness, strikingly similar in tone, emerges from the writings of Boole, John Harlan, Bonatti, Bonington, and Haston, the coldness of competence. Perhaps this is what extreme climbing is about, to get to a point where, in Haston's words, if anything goes wrong it will be a fight to the end. If your training is good enough, survival is there. If not, nature claims its forfeit. David Roberts. Paddy Agonists. Moments of doubt. We left base camp at 4:30 a.m. on May 6th to commence our summit bid. The top of Everest, 2 vertical miles above, seemed so impossibly distant that I tried to limit my thoughts to Camp 2, our destination for the day. By the time the first sunlight struck the glacier, I was at 20,000 feet, in the maw of the western Coombe, grateful that the icefall was below me, and that I would have to go through it only one more time, on the final trip down. I had been plagued by heat in the Coombe every time I'd traveled through it, and this trip was no exception. Climbing with Andy Harris at the front of the group, I continually stuffed snow under my hat and moved as fast as my legs and lungs would propel me, hoping to reach the shade of the tents before succumbing to the solar radiation. As the morning dragged on and the sun beat down, my head began to pound. My tongue swelled so much that it was difficult to breathe through my mouth, and I noticed that it was becoming harder and harder to think clearly. Andy and I dragged into Camp 2 at 10:30 a.m. After I guzzled 2 liters of Gatorade, my equilibrium returned. "It feels good to at last be on our way to the summit, yeah?" Andy inquired. He'd been laid low with various intestinal ailments for most of the expedition, and was finally getting his strength back. A gifted tutor blessed with astonishing patience. He'd usually been assigned to watch over the slower clients at the back of the herd, and was thrilled when Rob had turned him loose this morning to go out on point. As the junior guide on Hall's team, and the only one who'd never been on Everest, Andy was eager to prove himself to his seasoned colleagues. "I think we're actually gonna knock this big bastard off," he confided in me with a huge smile, staring up at the summit. Later that day, Goran Kropp, the 29-year-old Swedish soloist, passed Camp 2 on his way down to base camp, looking utterly worked. On October 16, 1995, he had left Stockholm on a custom-built bicycle loaded with 240 pounds of gear, intending to travel round-trip from sea level in Sweden to the top of Everest entirely under his own power, without Sherpa support or bottled oxygen. It was an exceedingly ambitious goal, but Kropp had the credentials to pull it off. He'd been on 6 previous Himalayan expeditions and had made solo ascents of Broad Peak, Cho Oyu, and K2. During the 8,000-mile bike ride to Kathmandu, he was robbed by Romanian schoolchildren and assaulted by a crowd in Pakistan. In Iran, an irate motorcyclist broke a baseball bat over Kropp's helmeted head. He'd nevertheless arrived intact at the foot of Everest in early April with a film crew in tow, and immediately began making acclimatization trips up the lower mountain. Then on Wednesday, May 1st, he departed base camp for the top. Kropp reached his high camp at 26,000 feet on the South Col on Thursday afternoon, and left for the top the following morning just after midnight. Everybody at base camp stayed close by their radios throughout the day, anxiously awaiting word of his progress. Helen Wilton hung a sign in our mess tent that read, "Go Goran, go!" For the first time in months, almost no wind blasted the summit, but the snow on the upper mountain was thigh-deep, making for slow, exhausting progress. Kropp bulled his way relentlessly upward through the drifts, however. and by 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon he'd reached 28,700 feet, just below the south summit. But even though the top was no more than 60 minutes above, he decided to turn around, believing that he would be too tired to descend safely if he climbed any higher. To turn around that close to the summit, Hall mused with a shake of his head on May 6th as Kropp plodded past Camp 2 on his way down the mountain. That showed incredibly good judgment on young Goran's part. I'm impressed, considerably more impressed, actually, than if he'd continued climbing and made the top. Over the previous month, Rob had lectured us repeatedly about the importance of having a predetermined turnaround time on our summit day. In our case, it would probably be 1 p.m. or 2. at 00 at the very latest, and abiding by it no matter how close we were to the top. With enough determination, any bloody idiot can get up this hill, Hall observed. The trick is to get back down alive. Hall's easygoing facade masked an intense desire to succeed, which he defined in the fairly simple terms of getting as many clients as possible to the summit. To ensure success, he paid meticulous attention to detail. The health of the Sherpas, the efficiency of the solar-powered electrical system, the sharpness of his clients' crampons. Hall loved being a guide, and it pained him that some celebrated climbers, including but not limited to Sir Edmund Hillary, didn't appreciate how difficult guiding was, or give the profession the respect he felt it deserved.